Hello and welcome to Fun, Faith, and Fuckery, the show that brings more play, pray, and slay into your day. I'm Nikki Bailey. I'm a performer, writer, and Emmy-nominated producer, and I have a Master of Divinity degree. I went to seminary to be clergy, and now I do this. So, yeah, I'm excited about the show today. I have an amazing guest, professor, author, and theologian, Reverend Dr. Monica A. Coleman. But before we talk to her, I want to tell you how you can be involved with the show and help make Fun, Faith, and Fuckery a success. First thing you can do is support the show by telling your friends and family. Share and help spread the word. Second, you can like, comment, thumbs up, review, comment on Facebook. You can comment on Facebook or YouTube right now, and we will see your comments in real time, and you can be part of the conversation. It really helps enrich the conversation to have you all involved, so let us know your thoughts. You can also leave 5 stars or give a thumbs up wherever it is you watch or listen to the show. And finally, making the show is a labor of love, but it also costs a little bit of money. So if you want to support the show financially, you can join me over on Patreon, where you can be a monthly supporter and gain access to extra features and special content. Or if you want to make a one-time donation to the show, you can do so through my Venmo at Nikki-Bailey-2, because apparently there was another one. Check out my website to find out more about how to support the show. So let's get started, y'all. Let me tell you about my week, okay? I was minding my business on Monday, just chilling, okay? Having a good old time, sitting in my chair, getting ready for the day, whatever. Doing my little morning meditation. I stand up. I literally just stood up. That's all I did was stand up, and my back went into spasm. Again. Because if my back is not in spasm at least 3 times a year, I did not have a complete year. So apparently this is now my life at this age, the ripe old age of whatever age I am now. And I'm not going to tell you, even though I'm not ashamed of it, because actually if I told you, it would blow your freaking mind, because I look like I'm in my 20s, but I'm not. Anyway, but at this age, my back goes out. And that's okay, because I have health insurance at this age, and I go to the doctor, and the doctor gave me some good drugs, and I'm back on the mend. But I went to acupuncture, y'all, and acupuncture fixed me right up. So if you've never gone to acupuncture, if you've never had those little needles stuck into you, you should get you some. It's good self-care. Take care of that business. Acupuncture can fix all kinds of stuff. So I want to tell you guys, I love mashed potatoes. I prefer them to be made with the skin removed from the potatoes before they're mashed, but because I like them smooth and creamy and richly buttery. When I make mashed potatoes for myself, though, I almost never take the skin off. I boil the potatoes. I throw them in a bowl. I just mash them up. I put in all the other stuff to make them delicious. And they are almost perfect, except that they still have the skin on. I don't remove the skin when I'm making mashed potatoes for myself. When I'm making my mother's famous shepherd's pie, or mashing up some taters for a quick dinner on a Wednesday night, I tell myself that I like the skin. It's good for me. It has fiber, and fiber is good for your body. I mumble to myself about how I'm saving the planet somehow by utilizing the whole potato and not just leaving behind the skin. And I say to myself, I'm just too lazy to be bothered. But between you and me, I think that's probably bullshit. I'm not actually lazy. I can't do all the things that I do and be an actually lazy person. Okay, I am lazy. I'm not going to front. I'm lazy. I'm totally lazy. But I'm not lazy about everything. And I don't think that the reason I don't peel my potatoes is because I'm lazy. I think it's because on some level, I don't think I deserve those peeled potatoes. On some level, I don't think I'm worth the effort. It's just me. I'm the only one who's going to eat them. Why should I go through all the drama of like peeling potatoes? Even if it does make for yummier mashed potatoes, it's too much work for me to do just for myself, right? I'm the only one who's going to eat it. Am I the only person who thinks that that's too much work to do for myself? No, I'm sure that other people have things that you do this to. Like, what's your mashed potato situation? What's your thing that you if you were doing it for someone else, you would do it differently? So I work harder and I buy the best quality ingredients when I'm doing it for someone else. I show up early and I stay late when I'm doing it for someone else. I go above and beyond for everybody but myself. Does that sound familiar to anybody? So let's fix that shit right here and right now. Check it out. You and I are both worth peeled potatoes. We're worth having the most delicious mashed potatoes we can have every time. And why shouldn't we have the biggest slice of pizza or a clean car or a cubicle with the best lighting? Why shouldn't we get the best things? Why should your best effort be focused on everybody else except for you? It shouldn't be. So, have it your way. Have it the way you really want it. Have it the way you deserve to have it. Peel your fucking potatoes, y'all. Do your best work for you before you do your best work for somebody else, before you give your energy to somebody else. In fact, I demand that you demand what you want. You deserve it. You deserve delicious mashed potatoes. You deserve delicious mashed potatoes every freaking time. So what's your mashed potato thing? What's the thing that you cheat yourself out of? So today I want you to give yourself an extra double dosage of goodness that you usually give away. The things you usually do for other people, I want you to do for yourself. So I want you to say to yourself, today I will fill in the blank for myself because I deserve the best. And you do. We all do. Ashe. My guest today is the Reverend Dr. Monica A. Coleman. She is committed to faith and social justice. She is a widely sought after speaker and preacher on the topics of mental health, faith, sexual violence, and church responses, liberation theologies, and religious pluralism. I can read. She's an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church and a priestess of Obatala and Oshun in the tradition of Yoruba religion. The Yoruba, y'all, my tongue, it's all, let me take a sip of water because I want to do justice to Dr. Coleman. You know what I'm saying? Because like, she's for real legit. So like I was saying, she's a priestess of Obatala and Oshun in traditional Yoruba religion. She has degrees from Harvard, Vanderbilt, and Claremont Graduate University. And she is a professor of Africana Studies at the University of Delaware. Please help me welcome Reverend Dr. Monica Coleman. Hi, Monica.
Hello, Nikki. It's good to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. I didn't want to mess up your introduction.
No, thank you for the great intro.
I had to take a little sip of water so I would get it right. So, which F do you want to discuss today? The fun, the faith, or the fuckery?
You know, let's start with fun. I know I switched them.
I think no, you know what? I think that's the best place to start because the way that I got introduced to you was through something that is super fun to me, which is the Octavia Tried webinars that you do with Tananarive Do. Mm-hmm. So tell us about the Octavia Tried webinars and how you came up with the idea and how they got started.
Well, you know, I am an Octavia Butler fan, and actually I'm a Tananarive Do fan too. But she's also my friend. Right? And you know, here we are a month into the pandemic, and I love all of Octavia Butler's books, but I've been teaching Parable of the Sower for years and years. And so I just shot Tananarive a text, knowing that she also loves Octavia Butler's work, and says, hey, don't you think the world's looking a little bit like Parable of the Sower? You want to do a webinar and talk to people about it? And she was like, yeah, that'd be fun. So we kind of came up with this name. Octavia tried to tell us a parable for today's pandemic, and that was probably the hardest part of it. And said, okay, let's just invite people to do a webinar. We're like, we don't know what we're doing. So we got a little bit of help from a grad student who's been a grad student at University of Delaware. And we thought maybe a couple hundred other people would want to have this conversation with us. And it was a couple thousand people who registered. And we were like, oh, wow. Well, okay, let's talk about it. And it just kind of kept going and took off. Other people wanted to join us. He wanted to talk to other people who loved Octavia Butler, who had other ideas about survival and hope, and who love Afrofuturism and are interested in building a new world and having innovative ideas about leadership. And so we said, well, let's do it as long as it's fun. And so we're still doing it because we're still having fun with it.
And it is fun. I look forward to them. I haven't been able to make the last couple, but I look forward to them all the time. Tell me, what is it about Octavia E. Butler that speaks to your soul? I'll tell you, for me, the first book of hers that I ever read was Kindred. And I didn't know what Afrofuturism was. I don't know if the word was even out there yet.
We didn't call it that back then. It was just science fiction.
We didn't call it back then. We didn't call it Afrofuturism, but I knew that I had found someone whose mind worked in a way that like fed my soul. And I was like, I don't know how she's doing this, but she creates worlds that are so much a reflection of both the time we're in and a reflection of where we might end up. And she's just such an amazing world builder. So what is it about Octavia Butler that like draws you to her for you? What is it that she does that makes you like, yes?
Well, you know, I had teachers who told me that I would like science fiction and I should like science fiction. This is even in like elementary school or maybe middle school and high school. And I didn't, right? I would read, I guess I shouldn't say the names of the authors, but white male science fiction writers, you know, Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov. And I was like, I don't like this. I don't want to finish this. It just didn't interest me. And I think, I don't know why that was, but I was like, why does everyone think science fiction is so great? No, it's not. And then I don't know when I heard of Octavia Butler, but I read Pattern Master series first, actually. Nice. And it's not explicitly Black, but you can feel the difference, right? Of just being drawn into another world. You know, she really does say, what if? You know, what if leadership looked different? What if women were leaders and in charge? And what if, you know, we bonded with different species in different ways? And what if this or that, right? And so I think Pattern Master is still kind of my favorite just because I love the terrain of it. I kind of feel myself there just thinking about it. Like she draws a picture and you feel like you're an Oankali, right? You feel like you're right there. You feel like you're in, you know, kind of among these sandy pyramids. And so with Parable, it was clearly Earthseed that grabbed me, right? Earthseed and Lauren, right?
Yeah.
Because, and it wasn't that it felt so real to me necessarily, but I was like, yeah, this is how you do it. It just felt like a model from the very first time I read it. And one that was hopeful, and one that's like, yes, this is how you look around. This is how you theologize. This is how you start a community and lead a community. And nothing's perfect in her worlds, right? It's not like she makes them ideal in that sense, but it still gives us a vision of what could be. And I think for me, that's hope, right? It's a vision of what could be. And hope is hard to find in the world. And so when you see it, I hold on to it.
You know, I always think that whatever your first Octavia Butler book is ends up being your favorite. That's what I feel like. Like Kindred was my favorite until I read the Wild Seed series,
Yeah.
and then I got drawn into that world in such a way that I legitimately wrote fan fiction for for those stories. I
Mhm.
loved it. But Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, and there's a third one that I've never gotten a chance to read. Have you ever
Really?
gotten a
Well,
chance to read
it's
it?
not out. It's, there are notes of it in the Huntington. But we'll throw it in there. If you go to YouTube and you listen to the Octavia Tried with her agent, Marilee Heitzfitz, she has a little Easter egg in there for what might happen with the third book.
Ooh,
So I won't tell it now. You got to go listen to it. But
yes.
yeah, it was supposed to be a trilogy. So
Yeah,
Octavia passed away way too young, right before she finished it. But there's a little Easter egg in terms of what might be happening with that.
awesome. I'm gonna go back and listen for that one because I don't think I think I missed that one. So the Earthseed religion from the Parable of the Sower books, Lauren Olamina, who is the protagonist of the story, writes creates a religion,
Yes.
and and the major tenet of the religion is all that all that you touch you change, all that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change.
Yes.
So
I just get
comment
warm
on that.
fuzzies just hearing you read it.
Isn't it? It doesn't it. It just does something to you. It just it because it's so true. It's so real.
Mhm.
Um, without and I think we're used to our religious texts telling us how to live and the dogma of religion. But what I love about Earthseed is that the philosophy is just God is change. So how does that what does that mean to you? What does shaping change mean to you? What does God being changed mean to you?
I mean, if I can nerd out here for a second, right?
Please, nerd all the way out.
I mean, I'm trained as a philosophical theologian, right? Which means I look at what we believe through the lens of how we understand the entire world, as compared to a particular text or one particular religious tradition. And so I like Ursi because it's a philosophy, right? This is how I look at the world. This is how I see the world happening. I look around, this is what I get. And that's the kind of philosophical theology I do. And while, as a scholar, I call it process theology, you could just call it Earthseed, right? Because it's the same thing. It says is based on the core principle of the world being change. And we are always changing and God is always changing. And when you have that as the core of what you believe and what you understand, you get really different things than you might get in a classical Christianity or a more classical version of any of the Abrahamic faiths, for example. And so I love it, right? Because I work in a philosophy and a tradition that uses really complex language. I don't think it needs to, but it does. And, Octavia comes out here and busts out with poetry, right?
Right?
And people memorize poetry. You remember poems. That's what sticks with you. That's what moves you. And so she really says many of the things that I believe, that I have come to believe, that made sense for my life and my own spirituality in powerful and lyrical words. And they come out of the voice of this, teenage Black girl, which
Yeah.
is even better to me and even more exciting because it reminds us that our leaders, our saviors, our priests, right, can look like us, right? Like young Black girls who, the world might see as having a shortcoming or a deficiency or a disability or a vulnerability. And I love that part of it. And so for me, shaping change is a word for how do we live, right? How do we live creatively? How do we build our worlds? How do we navigate change? And we don't want to be at the whim of it. We don't want to be fighting it, which is what plenty of people do, right? They
Oh,
feel like
absolutely.
tossed around by change or kicked in the butt by change or, surprised by change, but it's more like, how do you ride the wave, right, of change? And how do you live your life so that you are actively engaging with change, being changed and changing yourself and the world around you? And so for me, like, this is how we do it. This is the key.
I love that. So you mentioned process theology. Now, I'm going to tell you, in seminary, it went whoosh, right over my head. I remember being like, what?
Yes.
Process theology and death of God theology, both of them were like, what? So tell us, what is process theology? What is it? Because if you try to Wikipedia it, it gives you a lot of stuff that is not layperson friendly.
That is true. Most of process theology is not layperson friendly. And it is my personal joy and mission to try to make it make sense, because I think it's really cool. And so the short version is, in some ways, what I just said, right? If you believe that the core value is change, right? That there's one constant in the universe, right? Octavia Butler says the only lasting truth is change, right? If you believe that the core value, the core thing that occurs, if we could depend on nothing else, it's change. What does that look like when we apply that to our faith? So in process, we believe that everything that happens in the world is a combination of three things. One, what you have to work with, or your past.
Mm-hmm.
Two, what's possible in your given context. And three, what you do with it. Right? I mean, you can kind of get this from probably any pop psychology show, right? What do you have to work with? What's possible? And then what are you doing with it? Where's your agency? And we think that's true whether you're a quark or a rock or a frog or a person. Because we're people, we find people really interesting when they do it, but we think it's true for everything. And so the God part comes in because we believe if you're a theist, and you can be a processed non-theist, but if you're a theist, and I'm all about God, if you're a theist, we believe that God is the one who offers us possibilities. And that's where we can always have a source of newness or surprise or miracles, because there are possibilities that we might not have foreseen, possibilities that didn't come from the past alone that surprise us. And this is why we aren't always determined to do the same thing over and over and over again, right? That we can make new decisions, make new choices, choose new things, because there's no sense that we have to repeat the past.
What do you say to the folks? So in my church growing up, we learned God the same today, tomorrow, always. God is never changing. God is always the same, and that we change, but God doesn't. How do you reconcile, or do you not reconcile that? Do you just throw it away?
No. Yeah. Well, we have two ways of answering it, right? There we say there is a part of God that doesn't change. It's God's character, right? So if you believe that God is good, God's goodness doesn't change. If you believe that God cares about justice, that doesn't change, right? Like the kind of values that God has might not change, but God does change. And so for those who come out of classical, and by classical, I mean kind of this Greco-Roman tradition, believe that God and the world are opposites. So God embodies all the ideals and everything we wish we could be, and then humanity does not. So God doesn't change, we change. God is perfect, we're imperfect. God doesn't sin, we sin, right? And in process, we say, well, what if it's not like that? What if rather than God being the exception to the metaphysical principles of the world, God is the chief exemplification of the metaphysical principles of the world? So to put that in English, rather than God being the opposite of how the world works, what if God and the world work in the same way? And God is just broader than we are.
That is scandalous.
It can be. But, if you're coming out of Jewish and Christian traditions, Jewish scriptures really do show a God who changes. right? A
Yeah.
God who's like, I changed my mind. I thought about it. You did this, and so I did that, right? This very responsive God, this God that's in covenant, right? This God that's in relationship. And when you're in relationship, you respond, right, to somebody, to a people, to somebody else, right? You're not like, this is what I'm going to do no matter what you do. That's not relationship. And that's not the God we see in Hebrew scriptures. So I think that there are many traditions, not just, Jewish Hebrew traditions, but there are many traditions where God is very responsive with the world.
So in process theology, how do we manage things like heaven and hell? How do we manage things like sin and evil?
Well, just go for the big questions.
Right? Well, we were going to start with fun, but I went by it real fast because I knew I had all these other questions I want to ask you. So I'll come back to fun.
No, yeah. This is fun. This is fun for me.
Okay, good. Because it's fun for me too.
All right, so let's start with heaven and hell. And you'll get, this is process theology a la Monica, right? Because every process theologian does things a little differently. So heaven is very much how, if you're coming from Christian scriptures, the kingdom of God is with you now, right? Heaven is with you, right? Heaven is this ideal. It's not a place, because we know if you go up, you get to outer space. Thank you, Octavia Butler, right? So it's not like the earth is flat and up is heaven in the clouds and down is like fire, right? We know that's not like literally true. And so heaven is the ideal of what we like to, kind of God's vision. Some might call it the beloved community, right?
Mm-hmm.
The vision of what could be, that God is like, hey, you're always striving to get heaven on earth. We're always trying to get heaven on earth. And we don't get there, right? We fall short of it. We have glimpses of it. There are moments when we see our ideals for community and faith and justice lived out, but we don't see it in its fullness. And so it's that ideal, but there also is a sense of what I would call an ancestral realm, right? Of a place where spirits are, right? That, think about it in the terms of physics, right? Energy never dies, right? That's the kind of laws of thermodynamics. So because energy never dies, we don't die, right? Our bodies, we know, stop working, but you don't die. It goes somewhere. And so there is kind of a sense of an ancestral realm. As for hell, we don't have a hell. There's no hell in process thought. Because most understandings of hell are that it's a separation from God. And we don't think you can ever, 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 ever be separated from God, because God is inside of us and we are inside of God. And that's just the way it is. Like, you can't shake God. You can't lose God. God is in every part of our cells and our beings. So you can't be separated from God. But because we have agency, we can make enough decisions to feel like we have hell right here on earth. Like, we don't need to create a place to banish someone to, because an individual can make decisions, or sometimes power structures around someone can make enough decisions that one can feel like one is experiencing a pretty negative experience here on earth. So that's where we are on heaven and hell. That's the super short version.
Guess what? I'm totally a process theologian.
I'm not surprised, because, you love Octavia and Earthsea.
I knew I was. I just needed to make sure, based on like actual scholarship, because like I said, that whole unit in ST 103 with Dr. James Cone.
Well, Dr. Cone and I would talk about process, and he wasn't a big fan.
No, he was not.
He was not. And I have to say, I was not a fan of process when I first read it. I was like, what is this? Effery. I was like, I can't get down with this. This guy doesn't have the power to do what I need God to do. So when I first read it, I didn't like it either. But it was also, I think, because the people who were writing the process theology I was reading didn't have the same kind of commitments I had. Right? When I read people who were process theologians and liberation theologians, I was like, oh yeah. There aren't a lot of us, but there are now, particularly now, more feminist process theologians. There are Black process theologians, people who have these commitments about justice and liberation, as well as to thinking about change, right? And thinking about kind of agency we have in the midst of change. And so, yes, I get that it's not the easiest to understand, but hopefully, I know people teach some of my work, so hopefully it's more and more accessible. And I teach process theology to anyone who wants to learn it online, hopefully in accessible language. That's what I've heard. And so that we have another way to think about God besides this kind of God is up there as this authoritarian Michelangelo's brother looking dude who tells us what to do.
Michelangelo's brother. That was good. I like that. I usually say Magic Sky Daddy.
Yes.
Yeah. So you and I both share a mental health diagnosis in common. Or can we talk about that?
Yes, let's talk about that.
So I have bipolar 2. And for me, what that looks like is I have periods of very, very deep depression, like life-threateningly deep depression, followed by periods of I'm cool. I can get stuff done, and and sometimes those periods of I'm cool, I can get stuff done are I am so cool, I can get everything done. Which are so I have these low depressions, and then I have little hypomanias. And then if I'm really well medicated and doing all the right things, I find a balance in a place of balance for myself. What does your bipolar 2 look like for you? What does bipolar 2 look like for you?
Very similar to yours, right? I have deep depressions. And so, of course, like many other people, I was misdiagnosed as having unipolar depression for a while because the depressions are what bothers me, right? It's, very, deep sadness, deep melancholy. And not for like a couple weeks, for like months, like they're very long seasons. And what clinicians call hypomania, I call normal Monica. Because it's that very kind of productive person who has lots of ideas and who can do a lot of things. And I definitely can overcommit to many things in that season, but not because I can't do them if I were still there, but because sometimes the depression will come up before the deadline and then I can't do it, right? But yeah, to me, the hypomanias are where I feel well and strong and capable and healthy and able to multitask really well and able to be productive. And to me, I just feel like, yeah, that's normal me, that's happy me. And then there's depressed me. But I've come to understand that what I call normal me might be a couple ticks above where other people live.
Well, I really appreciate your understanding of your hypomania that way, because mine, I know that mine is a hypomania that is not necessarily a good thing, because I often have a mixed state hypomania, which is you have the depression, but you also have the high energy. And so for me, those aren't fun. But when I get to have the hypomania where it's like I'm getting stuff done, I love that. And I haven't thought of that as, oh, that's normal Nikki, but maybe it is. You're making me think about some stuff. Maybe it is. The most productive version of me might be who I really am.
Yeah. I have other friends who have mixed dates, who experience mixed date, and I hear it is torture. Like it is just absolutely painful and terrible, and will, drive you like, get me out of this, right? So I haven't experienced mixed date, so that's not part of my own experience, but I understand it is one of the worst aspects of bipolar 2 that a person can experience. And so
it's real poopy.
Yeah.
To give you my 4-year-old language for it, it's poopy.
Yes.
So I'm really deliberate about saying I have bipolar, not I am bipolar. Do you have do you have ways that you talk about it that you try to be careful about?
Yeah, I say I live with a mental health challenge, right? Because we all have mental health of various degrees at various moments in the day or seasons of our lives, right? And sometimes it can be very challenging, and sometimes that challenge can even be disabling, right? But it's not who I am. It's just one of the many things I live with, and one of the various experiences I have, or things that you manage and do. I think the part that is the hardest for me is there are a number of things I really have to do to be well. And sometimes I forget I have to do them. Like I think they're optional, but then they're not. And then I start feeling unwell. And I'm like, oh yeah, I have to like, like for example, working out is not like, oh, you can do it just because you feel like it. No, like you really need to do it. Like it's something I really have to do. And it's kind of part
Yeah.
of what keeps me well. As compared to like, oh, well, I can't, part of me is like, well, I should only work out if I'm feeling vain. And if I feel comfortable with my body type, then I don't have to work out. No, that's not your truth, Monica. Like, no, this is something you have to do just for your own mental wellness.
Yeah. For me, it's little things like I have to make my bed every day. I need to open my curtains every day.
Yes.
I take a shower every day. And for me, I know that when I stop doing those things, I know something's wrong.
Right.
Yeah. So you wrote
It's
this.
really hard in a pandemic, I have to say. So
Say it again.
That's really hard to stay on top of those things during a pandemic.
It really is. And I take comfort in the routine of them. The routine is really helpful for me. But it's also really helpful for me, for other people, because other people in my life, if they notice that I'm not, another one is I have to talk to somebody every day. Like I have to at least text with somebody at least once a day. And so the people around me, when they notice that those things aren't happening, they can say things like, oh, like if I haven't made my bed in 3 days and my partner's like, what's up with not making the bed? What's going on? Then that's how I know, I might be having issues, Yeah. You wrote the most amazing book called Bipolar Faith. Tell us what it's about and why you wrote it.
Well, Bipolar Faith is kind of my journey and a little bit of my family's journey with depression and faith. And I wrote it because, I think I wrote the book I wanted to read, the book I was looking for. I was looking for memoirs by people who have somehow survived this thing because I needed some hope that like I was going to be okay, that there was some kind of other side when I was in a really deep depression. And I couldn't find any. I couldn't find them by Black women. I couldn't find any at that time on bipolar 2, which is different than just unipolar depression, different than bipolar 1. And people were, to me, oddly a-religious. So no one wrote about that struggle. And so I wanted to kind of bring together the things that were most important to me, my culture and my heritage, as well as living with bipolar 2 and the struggle of faith. And so for me, it's kind of a spiritual autobiography. It meets a memoir of madness. And I also wanted to kind of push the story that I kind of wanted to also write like a Black girl story, right? Yeah. That to me feels very American, that the things that my family experienced, the legacies of war and trauma and poverty and sharecropping and slavery, which often lead to things like alcoholism and PTSD, that like none of us are okay, right? How could you be okay when you have lived through this and when you somehow manage to survive and love and have a family in the midst of this? And no one's going to call it mental health challenges among, the formerly enslaved, among people who are just trying to feed their children in the early 1900s. And so I wanted to say, this is really my story, but it's also the story of so many of us.
Yeah. So, I lost track of my questions. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
During Lent, I participated in a Lenten practice with you, reflecting on my own struggles with bipolar 2 with your book, Not Alone, Reflections on Faith and Depression. How how did the book and the faith journey of like shepherding people, how did you find out that you were somebody who that was your job, that was part of your calling, was helping to sort of shepherd people who are dealing with mental health challenges through their faith? How did you discover that? Like, I know that you got ordained really young, but how did you discover that they went together?
Me and God had it out. That actually is the case. You know, I felt called quite a while ago. I think it was right out of my 20s, to talk about mental health and faith. And I was like, I hear you, God, and no thank you. Right? Like, this is not something I want to do. This is not something I feel like I want to be public with. It's an area in which I felt and still feel very vulnerable, because it's not like over, right? It's still an ongoing thing I live with and, have to manage. And I work in the academy. And so it's like, okay, they say that being a professor is a life of the mind, and I'm going to tell people that something's going on with my mind, right? It felt like an extra kind of vulnerability and not something I wanted to do. So I felt like God was like, this is what you should do. And I was like, I hear you, no, thank you. And then God's like, knock, knock, knock. I mean, just these opportunities would keep coming and coming to talk about it, to write about it. And I was like, do you know what you're asking a player to do? Like, do you know what kind of position you're putting me in? And God was like, yes. And I was like, so then, these are my kind of conversations. This is like another year goes by, and, all these opportunities are coming up. And I was like, why? Why do I have to do this? Why do you want me to do this? And I wish I could say it was a burning bush, but I felt this response in my soul that said, because you can. And I was like, damn, I understand that, in the sense that it's something I could do, that I'm either bold enough, crazy enough, fearless enough, or don't care what people think enough, that it's something I could do. And that I had the capacity to do, that I had the skill to do, I had the temperament to do. And that needed to be done. And I was like, okay, so let's strike a deal, God, right? Then I'm still not like, I understand now. How about I'm not going to look for it, but if it comes to me, I won't say no. And it just rains down, right? Like, oh, will you write the article? Oh, students come. Oh, will you lead a conference? Oh, we got a grant. I'm like, really? And so it was like, all right, I hear you. And of course, it's a lot of energy knowing you're called to do something and saying no. Like, this is not how you should spend your time, right? Because things tend not to go well when you know in your heart you have a certain path and you don't want that path. And so I started the book Not Alone, which is that part of that journey, because I felt like most devotionals were kind of full of shit. I can say that on your show, right? Like, everybody is out here living this super holy life. And I was like, who are these people? Because that is not what my faith looks like. Like, I love God. My faith is very important to me. The ancestors are crucial to how I understand the world. And it is not all flowers and daisies. And so I wanted to really, kick out some reflections that said it's not all flowers and daisies. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes they that wait on the Lord are mad about waiting, not rising up on eagle's wings, right? I wanted to have some real engagement and kind of wrestle with scripture, but also embrace maybe sides of scriptures we don't think about often. And to do that publicly, because I felt like, well, maybe other people feel the same way I do. And maybe they're looking for that experience or those words or that language. And I know that the hardest part of living with a mental health challenge is that isolation, right? That feeling like no one understands what you're feeling, that you're all alone, that there's no one you can talk to at 2:00 in the morning when you can't sleep. And so leading other people through this in community is also like, no, you're not alone. It's not just you. And there's so many things that we can't get through on our own, but that we can manage to survive and live with, and sometimes even thrive when we have community and other people to support us.
Absolutely. One of the things that was actually the big gift from doing that 40-day Lenten practice with you was just knowing that I wasn't alone, like knowing that there were all these other people who were having similar struggles with not only depression, but like, how do I stay in relationship with God in the midst of depression when I'm pissed at God, or when I'm too depressed to bother with prayer, or any number of other thought processes we have. So it was really helpful that was one of the best parts of it for me, was like knowing that like other people got it. It was I think that's one of the major gifts of the book is being able to see, oh, other people, I get this, and I'm not alone in my struggle of like, how do I love God in the midst of my crazy. Yeah. So it's hard to believe in a God of love and nurture when you're suffering with depression. So what's your advice on how to, if you wanted to give a quick summary of like, how do you navigate faith in the midst of madness? Like, how do you, I know that's not a quick question, but if you could talk a little bit about that.
I mean, I think so much of our faith lives are surrounded by things that we are trying to do and have to do to be good at being faithful, right? Like I have to pray, I have to read my Bible, I have to go to church, I have to, you have to do these rituals, like things that you have to do in order to be like good with the divine. And I say, no, like it's cool. And there are all types of reasons why we cultivate our spiritual lives, but we don't have to, right? Like God's not going to kick us to the curb and lose our number if we don't say, all of our prayers at the right time in the right order and meditate for like 15 minutes a day, because sometimes you just don't have it in you. Like it is just not like I woke up, I'm still here the next day. That took a lot of energy and that's all I got. Yep. And so to me, in those seasons, faith is, if I can believe that God isn't doing this to me, then we're good. Like if I don't believe that God is the one torturing me and kicking my ass, then that's faith, right? And because as a process theologian, I don't think that you can ever be separated from God, right? I deeply, deeply believe, like it is a fact of the universe that God is with me. So that even at 2:00 in the morning when I feel completely alone, I'll be like, but God is here. And God is with me, and God is listening to me, and God is holding me, and God knows how this feels like I experience it.
And it's so hard to remember that when you're in the midst of depression. So thank God for your books so that people can remember that. So Monica, what do you love to do for fun?
I'm trying to remember what is fun. I like vegan cooking is kind of a hobby for me. I am an avid cyclist. I'm a little bit of a foodie, so I like either cooking fun things that are vegan or going out to vegan restaurants in whatever city I'm in. And I like hanging with my friends, right? I also probably binge an extraordinary amount of like online TV, but that's mainly pandemic, not all the time.
What was something you watched over the last year that really stuck with you?
Oh, just one thing.
Or your top 3.
All right, A Million Little Things. Is that the name of the TV show?
A Million Little Things.
I
didn't watch that one.
It can be triggering. It can be
that's
triggering.
Why I didn't watch it.
Mental health challenges, but I love ensemble casts. And the writing is so good. This Is Us, like everybody else. Like I Want to Marry Beth. Oh my gosh, she is like a rock. I love her, and I want to know who her girlfriends are.
I have decided that I am never watching that show, and here's why.
Why?
When they were doing trailers for it before it even came on, all of the trailers made me cry.
You cry. You will cry. You will.
And I was like, no, NBC, you were not going to have me crying every week. I will not do it.
Yeah, I still cry on Grey's Anatomy too. Like every episode, like I cry over something. So, and then, I have a little reality junkie in me, right? So,
Oh, nice.
I recently binged Family Karma. So
Oh,
I'm, so I kind of like, there are a couple reality shows I like too.
awesome. I am a Top Chef fan.
Me too. Oh my gosh, Top Chef Portland. I'm like, are you watching Top Chef Portland?
Wait, I'm only on the 3rd episode.
All I can say is, like, a DEI consultant hit that whole production team because
Seriously.
this is the most colored Top Chef, and I love it. Not just the people,
Me
but the things they
too.
do. I won't give it away, but I was like, what happened and where have you been all these seasons? It is so great.
And it's because because they have all the old people came back to judge it.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I agree with you 100%. Love
and
it.
I have my daughter watching it too. So we watch like kid cooking shows together, and like even the adult ones, we get really involved in them.
So do we. So do we. We yell at the screen. I love it. I love it.
Totally. Like Gordon Ramsay will yell, my daughter will yell back, right?
Somebody needs to yell back at Gordon Ramsay. I'm glad your daughter's doing it.
He yells too much. I'm like, it's okay. Take it down 1,000.
Right. We need to get him a Valium or something. I don't know.
I'm sure somebody told him make good TV or something. I don't know.
It is good television, though.
Yeah.
Well, Monica, thank you so much for being with us this evening. I really appreciate you.
Letting me talk about things that I love.
And thank you for teaching us about process theology. Where can people find you if they want to learn more?
You can find me at ckery.com. So you can find my books there. You can find the process theology course there. That's where everything is. So ckery.com. And you can run over there and grab a free 5-day devotional if you want to, right there on the homepage. So
yes,
I'd love to have you join my devotional community too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Monica. It was great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that is all, folks. Links to Dr. Coleman's website and books will be in the show notes. You can watch this episode on Facebook or YouTube tonight. Tomorrow, you can watch it on Instagram TV or listen to it wherever it is you find your podcasts. Please be sure to like, subscribe, share, and follow. And if you want exclusive content, you can join me on Patreon. The link to become a Patreon member is on my website at nikkibaileycomedy.com. As usual, it's been a blast. Thank you to my guest, Reverend Dr. Monica Coleman. Thank you all for joining me. Remember to get your play, pray, and slay on and sparkle as you go. I'll see you next week.